in the 06010. Focus, fantasy focus.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football presented by Boost Mobile alongside Field Yates and Michael Clay. My name is Daniel Dopp here for a very exciting Thursday show, my friends. We got big Thursday Night Football preview. We're diving into our Week 10 preview Part 1. Some lineup locks.
Did you have news for us?
Lineup knots. No, dude, we're so far into this season. We just talked about this the other day. I mean, Week 10 already. I really can't believe that we're here with the playoffs seemingly on our doorstep already.
Flying by, that is for sure, but still enjoying the heck out of it. There is something so exhilarating about the fantasy football season, so we are going to continue to motor our way all the way through Week 18. Fired up for a big show today, and while I always love Thursday Night Football because it's the first game of the week, tonight has me a little bit extra juice, not going to lie. Ooh, tonight, the game.
Yeah.
Bengals, Ravens. This feels like a lot of fun. I am hoping for a very fantasy-friendly game. We'll dive into that a little bit later on in the show.
Yes, we will. Of course, because we want it to be fun. We think it'll be fun. It's going to be like 6 to 9 or something like that.
How dare you? I have to ask you a question. What is your pin on your shirt?
It's a minivan.
Oh.
It's a minivan. It says Chris Staples on it. Chris Staples is a buddy of mine that's a musician, longtime musician, was in a band called 238, been doing a bunch of solo stuff on a place called Barsook Records. And so Chris Staples is just a buddy of mine.
All right.
Nice.
That's all.
Did he get a pin?
I should have known.
pins?
I mean,
Did you know who Chris Staples was? You did, definitely.
I've heard, yeah.
You guys have heard of Chris Stapleton, I'm
Stapleton
sure.
is what Mike
That's
is
the
thinking.
thing.
Yes, because that's what I was thinking as well. I was like, wait, Daniel's friends with Chris Stapleton, the guy who just like totally rocks it at like the Emmys?
I do not know Chris Stapleton, no, but Chris Staples is a good friend of mine, so I do love being
Nice.
able
I'm going to check out some Chris Staples music.
He's a
I
good
thought
guy.
it was a race car from over here, so I was excited. But I thought maybe I had recruited a NASCAR fan. But
You know what?
I
We
guess not.
talked about whether or not you're going to invite us to your fantasy NASCAR league a little bit earlier on this week, Mike, and it just, maybe my invitation got lost somewhere in the ether, but I have yet to receive it.
You just auto-delete all of my emails, so.
They go into a special folder. That's not a lie. That's just a true statement.
You can auto-delete emails? Did I just learn something?
Well, now, I don't know. You can send them to a folder. I'm sure you could. You could block the email address, something like that.
I'm sure you could do that.
Yeah, nice.
But NASCAR finales this weekend. It's the last races, championship races.
Can I tell you something, Mike? You could have told me that this was the first week of NASCAR,
I know.
and I would have believed you as well. That's how out of touch I am with the great sport of NASCAR.
I believe that.
You know any like big like NASCAR, like phrases or anything like that? Like, is there anything that you have ever seen?
Phrases. Gentlemen, start your engines.
Hey, that's
good,
not bad either. Yeah.
I would like to maybe potentially one day be the starter, right? That waves the flag.
You want to do that? You want to do the?
I like to
you wanna
drive the
wave
pace
flag?
car.
Yeah.
I've watched Talladega Nights quite a few times.
You can do all those.
Okay.
things.
So
I'm
You wanna
basically
give the
in
command.
NASCAR.
Field wants to give the command.
I think that's what it is.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Yes.
I like Robin's Racing. Isn't that from Days of Thunder?
That's from Days of Thunder.
I believe, yeah.
Good pull. Good, well done.
So,
Nice.
anyways,
You guys
all
know
right.
some stuff. You guys know about as much about NASCAR as I know about like any other sport.
The NFL.
That's fair. Yeah.
Oh, I set myself.
You did
right
set
up
yourself
and
up for that one,
You
Mike.
did. You did.
Yeah.
Good job, bud.
It's a volleyball term.
Good job.
All right, speaking of the NFL, let's dive into a couple of quick news topics. The Panthers activated Jonathon Brooks because they were at the end of their window, guys. Field, I do want to ask you this, though. It felt like we waited basically up until the very end to be able to do this. They've still got a really good running back in Chuba Hubbard. And this Panthers offense doesn't really feel, or not the offense alone, the entire team, doesn't feel like they're going anywhere in 2024. So do you have an expectation or a thought as to how much they would utilize Jonathon Brooks potentially from here until the rest of the season?
Let's throw 3 factors into play right now. First of all, timing is everything in life. As minutes before the show started today, the Panthers announced.
Before you say that, this is just fantasy football in a nutshell, right? Because this is like right when we get like, here we go, Jonathon Brooks show. We invested in him. We've been stashing him. We took him in the first round of Dynasty. Here we go. It's time.
And they extend Chuba Hubbard for 4 years.
Oh,
and like
my
real money, by the
goodness.
way, too. Like reportedly $33+ million with the chance to make even more through incentives. It underscores, like, and I think we and everybody who plays fantasy football has acknowledged this year. Chuba's good. Chuba's been really solid. He's been not just on the ground, but through the air as well. Like, he's probably been. Who's the best running back value pick this year? Probably J.K. Dobbins or him, right?
Yeah, Dobbins is a good call. Dobbins went earlier, but not by a substantial.
So it's one of those two guys, likely. So anyways, we have that factor. Chuba Hubbard, who we thought there was a chance, hey, maybe at the end of the season, if you play Dynasty and you have Jonathon Brooks, we're set for takeoff after this season. That ain't going to be the case because Chuba Hubbard is there to stay for 4 more seasons beyond this. Second factor. They go to Germany this week, and Dave Canales has been non-committal on Jonathon Brooks playing. I'm not perfect at figuring these things out, but I was watching the press conference live yesterday, and it definitely did not sound like a team that was planning on playing Jonathon Brooks next week. The following week is their bye. So week 10, I don't think he's going to play. Week 11, he won't play. Week 12, even if he does play, is he playing a little bit?
Yeah,
maybe
probably
a little bit.
yeah.
So I think we're at the point now where if you've been utilizing that coveted IR spot on Jonathon Brooks, I think he is potentially removable from the IR spot and droppable if need be.
Yeah, I agree. I have been stashing him in the IR slot in our FF Now league. Fortunately, I've been a little lucky there. I haven't needed it otherwise for the most part. And I just activated him, and I'm considering cutting him loose. I mean, it's a 10-team league. 12-teamer, you have a little bit more justification just in case he does get activated, plays, and looks really good and becomes a 12-touch guy and is really explosive and enough to be in that flex conversation, or if Chuba Hubbard misses time.
Right, that's probably what you need.
So, I mean, yeah, but right now, I think you're right. I think you evaluate him not as a potential lead back for your fantasy team down the stretch, but as one of the insurance guys like Blake Corum and Trey Benson. I think he's more in that vein at this point, which is not what we hoped for this year, but at the same time, if you took a shot on Chuba Hubbard, again, one of the best values in drafts, that's paying off big time. You're right. And I'll just say this, long-term in Dynasty, not ideal.
Not ideal.
But also there's a lot of two-man backfields now. And like, I think what the Panthers are probably imagining is kind of what Detroit's doing. You know, find ways to use both of these guys. Hubbard is not much of a factor in the passing game. Jonathon Brooks, the report there is that he can do both, right?
Solid, but Chuba's been solid in the passing game too.
But not, I mean, this year he's being used more than ever, but it's not even that much. Like, he's just not. Usually his target shares are like 6% or something, right? Brooks could be a 12 to 15% guy. So if he can take on like the Gibbs role, I mean, obviously this is the Lions' offense, but you know, if they find a quarterback down the stretch, maybe they get to a point where they're an average or better offense, and those guys can thrive from a fantasy perspective. So I wouldn't be happy, but I wouldn't totally panic on Brooks either in Dynasty.
I have a question for you, Daniel, and you can also chime in on Jonathon Brooks and his dynasty value / redraft value for the rest of this season if you'd like. But what is it like when we're constantly talking about how, like, yeah, this team is trying to model what the Lions do?
I'll tell you what, it kind of feels like you need to pinch me because I might still be dreaming. I've been at my entire life. My entire life has just been people talking about, can we just not have the Lions on primetime? Can we be able to not, like, no one ever wants to model anything after what the Detroit Lions have done. And now listening to so many people in the national media talk about it, I asked Mike this the other day. I was like, when the Eagles got really good, and they weren't always really good, like, how did that feel to you? Because I have a lifetime worth of scars and emotional, battering that I'm trying to work through to feel like, is this still real? Like, are we we're 7-1 with an offense that people across the NFL say, you know what, they can beat you in any way that they want to. And it's been so much fun to be able to watch the idea that, like, other teams in the NFL would want to emulate what my general manager and coach have been doing. We've been doing a carousel of GMs and coaches in Detroit. So, like, it's just on a personal level, it's a very fun thing.
We should get a TO press conference. Speaking of the Eagles, we should get a TO press conference of Daniel doing the "That's my quarterback" reenactment / "That's my GM" / "That's my head coach." I feel like you could. I feel like you are capable.
I could channel my inner.
Yeah, and not only that, but, like, I feel like you have the capacity to basically cry on command. Tears of joy, obviously.
Of course.
But, like, I feel like you could muster up some tears.
I think I can make it work.
Okay.
I think I can make it work.
Put that one on the to-do list of things to discuss. I'd love to do more Dynasty as we get closer to the offseason or during the offseason, like, re-vet out that Jonathon Brooks conversation a little bit more.
Yeah, and Dynasty also at this point in the year, especially as we come down the stretch, is very similar to 2025 rankings.
Yeah,
too.
it is,
It's kind of the same element at that point in the year. It's not always the case, but at that point it becomes that. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be a point where we're thinking, what do draft boards look like next year? We're week 10. I mean, we're
Great running back draft class,
We're
by the
2
way.
months away from putting 2025 rankings out. It's unreal.
Insanely good running back draft class, just as an aside. Like, real NFL draft, super loaded this year, including a guy who might be Bijan Robinson 2.0, like, in terms of where he goes. Like, that's how valuable Ashton Genty from Boise State is going to be perceived coming into the NFL draft.
And which is wild because right now, running back at week 10, I don't remember the last time in week 10 of an NFL season running back was this strong. I can never remember it being this strong.
Well, along those lines, why don't we dive into some names that I think hammer home the point that Mike is making right now?
I think that's a great idea. Let's do that. We'll talk about first and foremost whether or not these are lineup locks or lineup knots. Let's start with Tony Pollard taking on the Chargers this week. That's That's the first bit of negative news, taking on the Chargers, because they are very
the
tough.
only bit of negative news, though?
Honestly, it feels like it. Did you know that only 2 weeks outside the top 22 at the position, he has been sneaky good across the board if you had not realized with Tony Pollard, or if you put it another way, 6 weeks with at least 14.7 fantasy points.
Did you see, so this is the second straight week in which a member of the Titans coaching staff, Brian Callahan yesterday, Nick Holtz, their offensive coordinator last week, talking about how, we've got to be really smart about our usage with Tony Pollard. We got to scale him back, got to be mindful of that. That was last week leading into the game against the Patriots. We could see some Julius Chestnut. Tony Pollard had a total of 31 opportunities.
That's not scaling it back.
Seems like a lot. And since, obviously no Tajay Spears for a few weeks here now, and it's like, Tony Pollard just continues to play over 80% of the snaps. 22 opportunities 3 games ago, 24 2 games ago, 31 a game ago. Like, I did not have on my 2024 bingo card that Tony Pollard was going to be amongst the best workhorse backs in the NFL, right? Like, I thought that was not in his bag based off what we saw last year in Dallas. It felt like, hey, square peg, round hole. Tony Pollard's at his best to play. And I'm not trying to say that Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't have more than him, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, these guys who are so expertly managed are such game changers, but usually in that 12 to 16 touch range, and it brings out the very best version of them.
Yeah, a ton of volume. To your point, he's top 8 in carries and targets at running back this season, but he only has 3 touchdowns. His offense hasn't been very good. His efficiency has not been great by any means. And you talked about his floor, which has been fine. I mean, you get a ton of volume. That's going to give you a decent floor in fantasy. He has no ceiling, though. He has no weekly finishes better than 12th this year. So he's not giving you a top 10 week so far this season. And you mentioned it. This is a tough matchup against the Chargers. 2 touchdowns allowed, the second fewest fantasy points. No running back has reached 19 points against them so far this season. So combine that matchup with Tony Pollard, and you're like, there's no ceiling here with him. So I would not call him a lineup lock in this matchup because of the strength of the position. That's part of it. There's a reason he's ranked 25 for me this week. But he's still a flex option. He's a decent floor. He's going to get you to double digits, but just not much more than that.
Field, you had mentioned Tajay Spears not playing the last couple of games, dealing with a hamstring injury. Was limited in practice yesterday, so we'll continue to see whether or not we might see Tajay Spears out there, which would potentially take away a handful of carries or touches and opportunities.
It was not a split when he was playing, but it was much more than what
closer
it is
than
right
what
now.
this is.
Yeah. Shoot, man, it has been the Tony Pollard show of late.
For sure. All right, let's talk about Najee Harris.
Yeah.
Najee Harris, the next one up here, whether or not he's a lineup lock or a lineup not. Taking on the Washington Commanders. Washington's been mid-pack against the running back so far this year, Mike, but it does feel like this backfield has belonged to Najee Harris. Jaylen Warren is like the clear and distant RB2. We thought this might be a little bit closer. But coming into this week, do you feel like they might get either Jaylen Warren more involved, or you're worried about the defense he's going up against?
Yeah, I would say that with Warren healthy now the last 3 weeks, it's been a lot closer. But I think Harris has actually been right at or a little below, or I think he's like just a hair above 50% of the snaps over the last 3 weeks. So you're seeing some more Jaylen Warren now that he's healthy. But Harris still 16-plus touches in every single game so far this season, at least 100 yards and 16 fantasy points in 3 straight. Yeah. The Steelers have the hardest remaining schedule for running backs, so that's a reason why you might want to consider moving him before your fantasy league's trade deadline, but it's not that bad this week. Washington shuts down the passing game with running backs, but they're allowing 5.2 yards per carry to the position. That is highest in the NFL. That sets up perfect for Harris, who does most of his damage on the ground. So I think he's fine this week. I would lean towards him as a lineup lock. I think for this week, if I had him, he has to be in my lineup. But after that, I might want to field some offers.
You know what's kind of nice about Najee Harris this year? He's been much more explosive than years past. He's just been a better football player. That could be it. He's up to a career high. This is not a monster number, but he's up to a career high 4.4 yards per carry. That's like over a half yard better than prior seasons from Najee, when he has been in the range of 3.8 yards per carry. So that's been good. He has 6 runs of at least 20 yards already this year. How many do you think he's had in his first 3 seasons combined? So we've got a half a year left, more than half a year left for Pittsburgh.
I'm going to say 16.
He has 6. How many?
6
yards?
this season of 20-plus yards.
Oh, man.
And 3 full seasons prior to this.
I would say 8.
15. Good guess by Daniel.
Hey, all right.
So, and again, are those things a guarantee to happen every single week? No, but in prior years, you needed like the elite of the elite volume, at least the past 2 years. Because remember, as a rookie, Najee caught passes like literally every third play for the Steelers' offense. The past 2 years, part of why the ceiling really decreased for Najee was because if he didn't get like 30 touches, he was, flex city. This year, because of that explosive gear that we've seen more frequently than prior years, even if he's not touching the ball 30 times in a game, he might turn 18 or 20 opportunities into, as Mike said, 3 straight games of at least 100 rushing yards with 2 rushing touchdowns in that 3-game stretch. There's one thing and one thing only that makes me nervous for this week, Najee Harris. It's if the Commanders jump ahead in this game early. And if they jump ahead in this game early, it's going to be the Jaylen Warren show. Would be good news for George Pickens, not so good news for Najee
Harris. I think that makes a ton of sense. This team is averaging 29.5 points over the last 3 games. Their offense has just been a lot better, but Najee Harris still only 2 touchdowns on the season, which still is crazy to me. When you're a 6'1", 240-pound back, and you're not being utilized better at the goal line, that's a tough one for me.
Well, they had Justin Fields under center for a lot of that time, right?
And I know he stole a
handful.
handful.
Past 3 games, 2 rushing touchdowns for Najee, so perhaps trending up. A reminder of something I said yesterday: Steelers Commanders over/under 44.5. That's the highest for any Steelers game so far.
That's crazy.
This
That's
season.
the highest.
Yeah, would not surprise me if they have more games like that, because as I mentioned, 2 games against the Ravens, 2 games against the Bengals, a game against the Chiefs, a game against the Eagles going forward, and then a game against the Browns somewhere in there as well. But a lot of opportunities for higher scoring Steelers game in their final 9 efforts.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about another running back here. Taking on the Chicago Bears, that's Ramondre Stevenson, who, again, to me, you may not have recognized this, but he's been a top 7 running back in 3 of his last 4 games and a touchdown in all 3 of those games that he was at least a top 7 running back. Fields, we've talked about a handful of times what this offense looks like with Drake May under center, how it's starting to make that tick up, right? They're starting to get a little bit better. Honestly, from a fantasy perspective, Ramondre has been crushing it more often than not for fantasy.
Yeah, he's
recently.
close. He's on the border here for me. He's just outside my top 20. You mentioned the last 4 games. Over the past 2 weeks, he's the highest scoring running back in all of fantasy.
Yeah,
over
why?
the small sample size. Because he scores touchdowns.
Multi-touchdown
touchdowns
games.
in both games.
Yeah.
So here are the good things we have going for Ramondre Stevenson. The volume is ridiculous right now. And they either don't trust Antonio Gibson anymore, which, shocker that Antonio Gibson is just a guy, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason. Anyways,
he split snaps with Jermichael Hasty last week. He was just,
not to re-vet out, paying Antonio Gibson this offseason, but, that might be one where if they could do it all over again, they might do it a different way.
You mean CMC Light? Is that what you're talking about?
A CMC Light, that's correct. However, he's got a career low, does Ramondre, in terms of both yards per rush and yards per catch. He is the volume king, but he has a pretty darn good bet in games in which they can be relatively competitive to see 20-ish opportunities. He's also going to get the goal line work for them.
Yep.
Every week, the Patriots talk about needing to run the football better. They usually don't run the football better, and they usually allow the other team to run the football really, really well against them. But, the things that you need for Ramondre Stevenson to stay in your lineup are really good volume and good opportunities near the goal line. Both of those should be in his favor once again this week. So he's just outside my top 20, but darn close to being a lineup block.
Yeah, I think, it's close as well. 2.2 yards per carry since he's come back from injury in 3 games. The efficiency there has been really poor, but, he's scoring touchdowns. He has 7 in 8 games so far this season. And the Bears defense is good against the pass, not as much against the run. 5.1 yards per carry, that's 4th highest, and they're in the upper half in fantasy points allowed to running backs as well.
And
So
Andrew Billings, probably their best run
right.
stuffer,
Yeah,
just went
top
down for the
defensive tackle.
year, so that's no good for the Bears. And also the Patriots game script, right? We've seen the Bears play well offensively. Of late, they haven't suggested this is going to be a game in which, it's 31-7 in the 3rd quarter, and all of a sudden the Patriots have to throw the football every single play.
Yep. All right. With that being said, we still all have him inside our top 22. So if he's not a lineup block, he's at least a flex.
These first 3
probably
feel similar.
starting him, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These first 3 feel really close to me. You could have a scenario in which you just drafted really well, and you've got 2 better backs. But I think these guys are going to be in most lineups in 10-team.
Yeah, and our point here is kind of like we're at I'm at 19, 22, and 25 in my rankings, and we're talking about guys that guy had 31 touches last week, a guy that has 100-plus yards in 3 straight games, a guy that has 4 touchdowns in the last 2 games. We're talking about his flex options.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the guys ahead of them in our rankings, which we went through yesterday in the ranking show, or you could see at ESPN.com, you're going to be like, yeah, this actually checks out. It's just really strong right now.
Yeah. And we have, amongst others, no Kenneth Walker III this week. And these guys, so some
That's
of the
another
teams that are
part
on a
of it,
bye,
too. Yeah,
right?
they're out, too.
4
It's
teams on a
still-
bye, and you still have some of these players that might be on your bench. Pretty crazy.
It is crazy. One guy that I would have thought in Week 10 would have been higher than what he is, Travis Etienne in this Jaguars backfield. Mike, I believe you mentioned this yesterday as a part of the bus conversation we had. Taking on Minnesota. who will have the 5th fewest fantasy points to running back. And Travis Etienne just feels unstartable in this Jaguars offense. I don't think he's finished higher than RB20 this year, Mike. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's his best finish.
That's brutal. I mean, what are you doing now? If you've got Travis Etienne, I mean, you spent this draft pick, right? We're past the point, though, that, like, you can't really look back and be like, well, I invested this into him. At this point, I'm at the spot where if I cannot start Travis Etienne, I'm assuming I have a better running back on my roster. He's not only a lineup lock, but he's a desperation flex if that's what you need.
Yeah, agreed. And a tough matchup against Minnesota, 7th fewest fantasy points allowed. 3 running backs have reached 12 points against them so far this season, and he's in a committee. If you want a silver lining with him, it's the fact that he played like 12 of the first 13 snaps last week. They came out and said, you're back from injury, you're still our guy. He made a mistake, and he basically he played a little bit the rest of the game, but mostly was out. Maybe they do it again and give him another shot. Maybe he actually had like 24 yards and 3 carries in the game, so it's not like he was running horribly in that one. So maybe there's a chance he takes back 60% of the snaps and gets rolling at some point in the second half. It's possible, but they have a hard schedule, tough matchup this week. Tank Bigsby's playing well.
Like, not have Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's hard to justify starting him this week.
It's tough, man, too. Like, I think we should do a show at some point. And this might be more of an off-season show than it is an in-season show, where it's like, because I don't want to like spend the entire segment like projecting what that player is going to be, but it's almost like on the couch therapy about like, so I drafted Travis Etienne, and he's a 24-year-old running back who was a first-round pick, who was 3rd in the NFL in touches last season. He got to the point by about week 6 of this season in which I did not know whether I should be starting or sitting him. We're also going to have like a tight end we'll talk about in, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes from right now, who fits into that same category. I just want to have like some therapy about those guys.
It sounds like ESPN minus.
Yeah, it does sound like a little bit of an
Used to do this
ESPN minus.
on your-
Yeah, that would be
segments,
good.
same
Some
thing, yeah.
fantasy therapy, right?
Phil
Make
thinks
some
he
of
just
that work.
invented a concept that you invented.
No, so the other, like I've been workshopping that one. I also like so as I was planning about some of the guys that I wanted to start and wanted to sit this week, I was thinking about a column. I haven't quite gotten the sign off from the editors, but I was thinking like here are the players I love for this week. Here are the players that I hate.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That do
makes
like
sense.
love/hate or something.
Yeah, love hate. Right, exactly.
Good. All right.
Does anybody do that or no?
Not that not here
Miss you, pal.
recently. Yeah, we do miss you, buddy.
Do we wait? Okay, so that's been taken.
Yeah, I believe so. I think
that's
Ken
safe.
Dobby right.
Yeah,
on
I was
that one.
thinking like the players. You know how like on Tuesday nights we all put in our claims. Like,
Yeah.
we should do a column like waiver wire and then like tell people who they should pick up each week.
Right, and then when you get the player, you have to wave to them. So it's like you could spell it wave like W.
No, I wouldn't do that. I would just call it the waiver wire and then write about players to pick up on waivers.
You've always been not great at titling things, though, Mike. For what it's worth, your creativity is
Waiver
lacking.
wire's not a good one. All right. I'll workshop it.
All right.
For what it's worth, in this Jaguars backfield where we talk about Travis Etienne not finishing inside the top 20 is his finish. 20th is his finish.
Yeah.
Knowing that his backup has an RB1 and RB8 finish under his belt, and Tank Bigsby just also doesn't feel great because it's a legitimate
ETN,
backup.
dynasty value. What is it? No one knows.
And by the way, Bigsby, he's still like he's a non-factor in the passing game when ETN plays. He had one game with a handful of targets when ETN was out, but you can't start him either right now. Neither of these guys are.
Can't do it. To
All right.
quote Mike Singletary.
Let's get one more, at least one more. I didn't catch it at first, but then I was like, that's it. That is what it was.
Went deep there with the voice.
Yeah, you did. I liked it.
Can't do it.
I liked it, Field. It felt like you had a little facial hair there for a minute. Like,
That I don't.
There's a little bit. I see a little. I can see the outline there.
if you just let it go this
throwing it out
offseason
all
for like
season.
2 weeks, would it get any? Like, would you get scruffy like Mike at all?
This is a playoff beard.
It would not work
All
out.
I love it.
Really?
Oh, I would love to see it.
You have. No, you have.
Oh, yeah, this is my.
Yeah. You started in week 1. He stopped shaving after week 1. No time.
No time.
I mean, he's doing draft. He's working on the draft and fantasy. I mean, there's no
ET,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
ET.
Is there any chance that you could do like both Singletary and Harbaugh having a conversation back and forth where you just play both of the roles? Oof. Maybe we'll think about that. Workshop that one as well while you're workshopping some segments. Let's see if we can figure that out. All right, one more bit of running back news that we have here. Brian Robinson taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. For what it's worth, he was a last-minute scratch. I found out during Only Dan's on Fantasy Football Now from Dan Graziano.
It's a great segment.
It is a pretty good segment. That one has been a lot of fun this year. But Graz let us know last minute he was not going to roll last week. Became the Austin Eckler show. Brian Robinson Jr. was limited at practice yesterday, so we're going to continue to monitor that as well. Assuming that he plays, taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers field, how are you approaching Brian Robinson? Is he a lineup lock, or is he somewhere outside that top 20, more of a flex
Yeah,
consideration?
he's another guy that's close to that top 20. There's a party that says to yourself, like, how can you not start this guy when he's got 6 rushing touchdowns in 7 games this season? He also feels like one of the best bets to get a goal line or an inside the 5 carry in the NFL right now. Not just because he's a really good power back, but also the Commanders score on basically as many, like the highest percentage of their drives of any team in the NFL right now. On the other hand, if he doesn't score, you might be in trouble because there's a chance he's limited because of this injury. Does not get 20 carries, but gets maybe more like 12 or 14. And he has 1 catch in his last 3 games.
That's not good.
So, yeah.
You know what this reminds me of a little bit? I just thought of this while you were talking. Is like a little bit like Gus Edwards last year. You know, he got all that goal line work and scored all them touchdowns, but was just a 0 in the passing game. And you're right, Robinson, 79 receiving yards so far on the season. And 14.5 carries per game. That's not a massive number by any means, but he does have 6 touchdowns in 7 games. But yeah, the upside is not there. Sometimes these things sneak up on you. He has 0 top 10s this week. It's kind of like last week, someone was in my mentions on X, like how could you guys not rank Jahmyr Gibbs higher every week when he's top 5 every week? He has 1 top 9 this season.
What's
Gibbs
X?
finished top 9 one time? I don't know. It's some sort of social media platform I use because I have more followers than you because you don't know about it. So
I'm a blue sky guy.
I was just going to say
you can sign up and have more than us in like 5 seconds.
Stop.
That's so
But anyway, tough matchup against the Steelers. So I mean, if he plays again, he's much like Ramondre and like Najee and Pollard, who we talked about. You're probably starting him, but I wouldn't say a lineup lock for sure. By the way, if he sits again, Austin Eckler, RB2. You know, he was fine last week. He scored a touchdown early. He actually did most of his damage in the first half, and he seemed like he was on his way to a huge game, and then his playing time kind of cooled in the second half for sure.
Let's say that he doesn't go. If for some reason we find out that Brian Robinson doesn't go, we see Austin Eckler again. Austin Eckler.
Okay, so you just weren't listening to anything I was saying.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I was trying to figure things out here.
No, what happened was I actually take Daniel off the hook there because Daniel had an autoplay on his computer.
I did.
Like the music
I pulled up the
started rolling.
rankings
He's like,
for the
That
next
wasn't an
segment.
autoplay. I
Abandon ship. How do I turn this off, but also sort of pay attention to Mike at the
That
same
was my
time?
bad.
started
That was my
talking,
bad.
and then he was like, I don't care, and he started watching videos on YouTube.
You know, I feel bad about
He was
that.
trying to find my blue sky profile. He's like, immediate follow, please.
I'm like,
Oh,
Austin, I just had this whole speech about what to do if Robinson's out with Eckler.
Okay, but now what if
Like,
what if I've got Brian Robinson Jr. on my roster and I need it? All right, so I'll ask you again after
Start
the
Chris
show. Maybe
Rodriguez.
I'll watch the
Okay, that's what you do. No one else should, but you should start Chris.
Actually, don't start Chris Rodriguez because the guy's been on the team for like 3.5 years. They traded for Marshawn Lattimore and immediately gave him Chris Rodriguez's number. Did you guys see that?
No, seriously? Oh gosh.
So I don't know what number Chris Rodriguez is now wearing, but it's no longer 23. Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for running backs. Obviously, we'll have more tomorrow when we do our part 2 preview of Week 10. Let's dive into a couple of tight ends. Field, you kind of alluded to one of these guys, I believe, that we were going to be talking about.
We need some therapy on.
Sam LaPorta. My guy, Sam LaPorta. Here's a question,
Okay.
and I think it's a fair question at this point of the season.
Is he Marquez Valdez-Scantling of tight ends?
His best finish this year is tight end 8. He's got 3 finishes inside the top 10, and his best finish is tight end 8.
Yeah.
Here we are in Week 10. He's on an unbelievably efficient offense that's scoring a ton of points in real football.
Yeah.
But he's just not really utilized from a fantasy perspective in a consistent way at all. Last 2 games didn't have Jamison Williams. One of those games he looked okay. The other game he was just back to being the average Sam LaPorta that we've known this year. Is he not just a bench, but do you believe that here we are in Week 10, I need to make some moves? Do you think that you could drop Sam LaPorta, or are you still holding him on your bench because of what this offense and this player can do if things are clicking?
Let me ask you guys a question. If I say the greatest sports mystery that you can recall off the top of your head, is there one that immediately comes to mind?
Greatest sports mystery.
What's mystery?
Okay, because I can't think of one other than what I'm about to nominate. What happened to Sam LaPorta? Like, and not like he did not change as a player. It's just, I've said this many, many, many times. And I'm going to take this a step further to another player in this offense, is that, like, I would have thought coming into the season that he had one of the safest paths to relatively close to what he was last year. Maybe not getting to 10 touchdowns because that's hard to do, but being a top 2 tight end was very much in play. And I got to be honest with you, maybe things will change a little bit once this team, maybe, I'm trying to think if are they going to face tougher competition? Like, every team they play, they curb stomp like they're a junior varsity team out there. But what we have seen this year is arguably the most impressive sharing experience of all time. Like, I want my kids to just model their game after the Lions. Share like the Lions. Sam LaPorta, who's 27th amongst tight ends in targets and catches, is an awesome player. Amon-Ra St. Brown is spectacular, and he's still obviously a lineup block. Even Amon-Ra, relative to like 5th or 6th overall pick, pretty clearly was not the guy that should have been going ahead, potentially, of some of the other nuclear options that were available right there as well. He's great. I'm not saying Amon-Ra has been the reason you've lost, but like
It was like Jefferson or Chase.
Jefferson, Chase, Saquon, A.J. Brown, like all of those players, week in, week out, I would rather have over Amon-Ra right now, just because he's just not seeing crazy, ridiculous volume. So it's just been this bizarre thing with the Lions. Like, to get us back to the question that you're gonna, is he droppable? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, and especially in a 10-team league, he's definitely not a player you have to hold. Hasn't cleared 6 targets in a game. I mean, that's not a guy you feel great starting. And, yeah, his only double-digit games were the games where he scored his 2 touchdowns. His only 2 touchdowns of the season. What's wild about it is you look at his snaps and his routes, and they're down slightly from last year. It's almost identical, but target share, 21%, down to 10%. Air yard share, same thing. Went from 21% to, that's 10%. Target share is 12%. So it's just like basically cut in half. He's still on the field. He's still running routes. He's just not being thrown to. And if you're thinking
That's why
about,
I called him the Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
yeah, exactly. And if, by the way, if you're thinking about using him this week, he's just playing the Texans who've allowed the fewest catches, yards, fantasy points, the lowest yards per target, and the lowest catch rate to tight ends this year. So he's definitely not startable right now. And I agree. I think the question now is not like, is he startable? Is he droppable? And the answer is yeah.
That hurts. It hurts because it does feel like they're slightly different, and we've talked about this, but like the NFC version of Mark Andrews, where you have an offense that's scoring a ton of fantasy points. Yeah. You have a tight end that you've seen be a superstar in the league, and yet for some reason, mind you, Mark Andrews at least had double-digit fantasy points. I think he got in the end zone for all the games that he's also had double-digit fantasy points, just like Sam LaPorta. But it's just like, what's gone on here with both of these 2 tight ends? It does feel like Jameson Williams has come on. He hasn't had a huge target share. We'll talk about him a little bit later on in the show. But he has taken away a few targets. Tim Patrick is a guy that we all have rooted for Tim Patrick as an NFL player, but he's come in and Jared Goff has looked for him.
They're all nibbling.
Those safety blankets. Yeah, and so
all nibbling.
That's taken away a lot of what that volume was for Sam LaPorta last year, which has been unbelievably frustrating, in part because I told Rosie to draft him in one of her leagues.
Well, dude, I got a team, like, if I told you, I got a team that the nucleus is led by Jaden Daniels, Bijan, and Malik Neighbors. Like, don't you feel like that team alone, even without knowing what the rest of it looks like, is going to have a chance to be like pretty darn good squad?
Yeah.
It's like mid-pack. It's like 5th.
It's like my dynasty
teams.
team.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's like I have Andrews sitting there at tight end most of the year. Yeah.
This is the problem, though, is that I also drafted Travis Etienne and Sam LaPorta in this league.
I have Etienne in that league, too.
So it's like everything else. Like, you know, I have George Pickens and DeAndre Hopkins. So I've got like solid wide receivers, but like, if I just told you that like I had Jaden and Bijan and Malik Neighbors, you'd be like, damn, that squad must be loaded. Yes. No, it's a 12-team league. It's in like 5th or 6th place or something.
Mm-hmm. All right, I got to ask you this question live on the air then, because my wife is listening at home, who's
hi,
projected
Rosie.
to lose 115 to 138. She's got David Njoku on bye. Would you drop Sam LaPorta in order to pick up Hunter Henry this week?
Who is
Hunter Henry.
She needs a tight end.
Yeah.
I
would.
Yeah, I mean, if that's your worst player on your bench, sure.
Gosh. Wow. This is why I need you guys, because like my Lions bias makes it so hard for me to say I need you to cut them from the team.
Not only that, this is we don't mix marriage and fantasy football advice. Rosie, this is just you and me.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Let's just talk about this for a second here. We want you to win. We want you to win big this weekend. Hunter Henry looks like Drake May's most trusted target. Drake May, by the way, stud, off the charts stud. All right. You're going to have a big day from Hunter Henry, and it's possible you don't have a big day from Sam LaPorta. But if you do get a big day from Hunter Henry, you can thank me. If you drop Sam LaPorta and he goes off, Mike is also on board with this call. Yes. So please direct all of your anger to Mike Clay, NFL on Blue Sky.
You trying to, like, he's looking down barrel, romancing your girlfriend? Like, what?
I don't think it was, I don't know. No.
I just wanted to make sure that Daniel was off the hook here.
Exactly. I don't have to be a part of it.
And I wanted to make sure that you are on the hook if Sam LaPorta balls out.
Good news is, even if Sam LaPorta does well, that likely means the Lions are doing well, so we're still getting something positive there as well, for what it's worth.
Way to look at it.
Yeah, all right, babe, go ahead and you can drop Sam LaPorta for Hunter Henry.
No, you don't have to say it. It's okay.
Field lets you know that it's allowed, and that's what matters here. All right, speaking of if it's allowed, Mike Clay, TJ Hawkinson, we saw him come back last week. As a reminder, if you did not listen to the show yesterday, what he did last season. 12 of his 14 games, he had double-digit fantasy points. This dude is a stud. He is unbelievably good. You told us yesterday, Mike, he played 45% of snaps in the first game back.
I just got a text from my wife, and she wants to know, she has David Njoku on a bye. Can she add TJ Hawkinson and drop Sam LaPorta to play in this?
That's a great question.
That's an easy one.
Go ahead. You want to talk down barrel to Chapin real quick? Go ahead.
No, is she actually watching?
You're in the
I'm not
clear
doing
there.
That seems I can't do that.
Suspect.
But yeah, you can start.
Mr. Steal Your Girl over here.
I know,
Can't
right?
do it because next thing you know,
I'm too cool for that. I don't do that.
Yeah,
I like
right.
Down barrel. It's weird.
Mike, you're a guy with 2 bananas, an apple, and you're ugly or something like that. I don't remember what the
right.
joke was, but it was.
People that did not see FF now are very confused. Wait a minute. What is he talking about? 2 apples and a banana.
I'm still confused by that joke, but I was laughing my butt off by the end of it. Yeah.
It took you a minute. Sometimes it takes Field a minute to get it.
Wow.
Not you though. You're across. You're the one that laughs across.
I'd like,
the set.
yeah, I'd
I
like
put
him.
you on set for those because you laugh first.
He also has a great joke. A great laugh, sorry.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say I have a great joke.
Probably. You have a great
I
laugh.
stand by it. It was a good joke.
It was a good one. All right, well, let's talk about TJ Hawkinson. Just in case people didn't listen yesterday, we saw him come back last week. He was a little bit involved in this offense, not as much as vintage TJ Hawkinson. This week, are you assuming with your projections that he's going to be out there with more run on the field?
Only 4 targets, 27 yards in that game. Again, played a little under half the snaps. I would expect that to go up 30, 40 per. The snap count. Maybe 70 in this game would probably be fair. Like maybe not a full time or give him a few plays off, but I expect him to play more. And the Jags are a pretty good matchup, upper half of the league in fantasy points allowed. 5 touchdowns to that position, and really all you need is a touchdown. So you get 6 targets and a touchdown out of Hawkinson, you're going to be fine. So yes, he's back in that. I would say it's a kind of a weird one. We talked about this just a couple weeks ago. It's weird to call him a lineup block because you drafted him as your second tight end in every league, so you might have a good.
But that might be Brock Bowers.
Starting, yeah. I mean,
He's on a bye.
Bowers, David
Njoku,
Njoku,
Sam
Sam
LaPorta.
LaPorta.
But that's true. So you might not have to start him
Henry.
yet, but you can.
If you drafted Mark Andrews or Sam LaPorta or Brock Bowers or David Njoku, you are in line for a great TJ Hawkinson week. But I do understand, for some of these other guys, it's going to be tough to be able to potentially start them if you do have the Kelseys, the Kittles, McBrides kind of.
I also think this, and maybe this is me trying to make something happen out of nothing but good vibes.
Speak it into existence.
Sure. I think the Vikings are going to want to get him one soon too. It's just natural to think that a guy who's worked as hard as he has to get back from such a big injury, they want to at some point, they want to reward a player. So it wouldn't surprise me if that comes sooner than later. He actually had a target. Do we qualify as a target if the ball is picked off before it reaches the player?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so he had an end zone target last week. It's just that Zaire Franklin
Stepped right in front of
right,
it.
he stole it, and he was like, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually targets pretty much align with pass attempts other than throwaways or spikes.
Gotcha.
That's the difference, but
Yep.
generally they're, yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about one more tight end here. I think this one is a really good enigma because we see it a little bit differently here. Jonnu Smith taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Guys, in his 2 games with Tua back, tight end 31, tight end 15, and I got to be honest, from a fantasy perspective, his week 7, 22.6 fantasy point outburst was infuriating.
Oh.
Infuriating that it didn't go to either Tyreek Hill or Jaylen Waddle. Instead, it was Jonnu Smith. So the question here is, would you trust him as a potential starter in week 10? Because I have him as tight end 16. You guys have him a little bit higher up that list. Maybe it's because I'm trying to manifest more Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle, and just make it not go to Jonnu Smith.
I will take being wrong on this if it means more Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, but he's kind of on heater right now is John. He's got 4 straight games with at least 4 catches, 4 straight games with at least 6 targets. He's playing a lot more over those 4 games than he was earlier on in the season, whether that's because they are deploying fewer 3-receiver sets and more 2 tight end sets, or maybe because they're seeing less from Durham Smythe or other tight ends. He's playing enough and seeing the ball enough. I've got him as tight end 10 this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm at 11. And, Daniel, I can tell you're really angry about him stealing all these targets. And obviously you're going to know the answer to this. But over the last 4 weeks, who leads the Dolphins in targets?
Jonnu
Smith
Smith.
leads it.
Yeah.
It's unreal that he's first on that team.
Isn't that infuriating?
It is infuriating. It's kind of unreal, especially for a system that did not really utilize the tight end in the past. But this is a good matchup, too. The Rams are top 7 in yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points to tight end. So if you need a streamer for one of these guys that's out or on a bye this week, I do think he is a fine option there. And it's funny you talk about 12 personnel or 21, whatever it is. Odell Beckham's back now. and he's still the 4. Like Malik Washington's playing ahead of him right now, so they're similar in routes, but not playing many snaps. But he's out there.
Let's have this conversation here just quickly.
Oh, you want to talk about his brother on Love Island USA, Cordell Beckham? Is that where you were going with that?
That was not, but his
What a
brother,
pivot!
John-
I was not ready for that, Mike Clay.
Oh, I thought that's where
you did say that you've been watching Love Island USA.
Yeah,
recently.
well, I mean, I don't know if I would be spoiling it because it ended in like
Okay.
July or August, so I won't
don't
say
spoil it.
anything.
Don't
But
say
yeah, he was a major factor on that.
Major factor. I love it. Going forward, if Odell Beckham Jr. signs with the team, or if Dalvin Cook signs with the practice squad, please spare me the fantasy question.
Yes, I am with you.
All right, you know what? In the offseason, you used to draft him in the 5th round. You were like Lazard in the 4th, Beckham in the 5th,
Okay, I said 5th.
Cedric Wilson in the
16-team leagues, though.
Is this?
This is not true. I'm totally.
Yeah, I mean, guys, come on now, please.
I'm with you.
I agree. Yeah, he was never an option in fantasy this year, and still
you
is.
know, like, if I got one question about those guys, that was one too many.
I agree
All right,
with you.
that's just how it works.
Looks like Julio Jones signed with the team. Should I drop
Your Eagles?
CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Pick
All
up
right, let's
Julio?
keep talking. Let's keep moving.
I do want to ask you this question really quickly. You mentioned
please
Alan
do.
Lazard in the 4th field. Wasn't your bold bet that Alan Lazard was going to outscore Mike Williams and
Correct.
who was the other? There was.
Jalen Polk was going to outscore both of them.
Oh, that's what it
That
was.
one's looking bleak.
Okay, I thought it was
The
Lazard was going to
part is
outscore those
looking-
two.
We'll see. I mean, maybe. I guess I should have accounted for the possibility of a trade.
I don't know. I feel like you get a win on Lazard.
I think so too.
I think like
I give you a dub.
Honestly,
for that.
honestly, like if we're being totally honest, I would argue that my Lazard call was so good that it negates my Richardson call.
You know, I think people, if they had,
You guys debate that. What do you think?
what's worse, taking Richardson at 5th or not taking a last round flyer on Lazard? I gotta disagree on that one, but I will give you. I think like sometimes with
I thought
these,
you were a good teammate.
right?
I think with these board bets though, sometimes you have to just like, yeah, you know, what I mean, it might not be within the terms, but it's like, okay, you won Lazard. Like even if Mike Williams tears it up with Pittsburgh, you get the win there.
No one got it wrong.
It's much like Nico versus Diggs. That one, like,
Yeah.
I know Diggs got hurt, but like it was Nico. You know, like Nico's the winner of that.
Wow.
Sure.
Yes.
Speaking of Nico Collins, and we will dive into some wide receivers here. I looked at the practice report for yesterday. Nico Collins again.
Yeah.
Field Yates.
Out of the projections. There was a bunch yesterday. I cleaned a bunch of guys out.
Not at
A lot
practice,
of
for what
T.
it's worth.
Higgins and him and Damian Pierce. Like there was low end and high end ones.
Yeah, we'll just keep our eyes on Nico here. Don't know for sure, but you know, again, they could have. I brought this up for a reason on Monday.
Yep.
And here we are on Thursday. I said on Monday, like we still
Yeah.
haven't seen him
You're right. Yeah.
brought back from IR. It's Thursday. He is still not back from IR. D'Amico Ryans did not rule out the possibility of him returning to practice at some point this week. However, if it doesn't happen today, you can all but count on him being out on Sunday. And as of right now, I would be planning for him to not be available on Sunday.
Yeah.
gotta-
That seems like a long shot right now.
This one is tough for me because like the head and the heart want two different things. You know what I mean?
No. Lions fan, you should be
Yeah.
rooting for him to
Yeah.
continue to get well with the rehab.
I agree. All right. All
Anyways,
right.
let's keep moving.
We'll see how this works out. All right, let's do a little wide receiver wellness check, my friends. What do you do with Michael Pittman?
Oh,
Taking on Buffalo. Here's the thing. It has not been pretty. You just really can't paint it any other way than that. I'm going to mention a couple of things here. First 3 games, he was awful. Wide receiver 58, wide receiver 62, wide receiver 54.
Yeah.
Awful first 3 games. Middle 3 games, it wasn't so bad, my friends. It started to feel like he was coming alive. Wide receiver 20,
What happened
wide
there?
receiver 22, wide receiver 28.
All Joe Flacco games.
All Joe Flacco. But then the last 3 games, it's like you're back to the why am I starting this guy again scenario. Wide receiver 37, wide receiver 93, and wide receiver 37. I am holding out hope because I do believe last week with Joe Flacco it was more of the exception, not the rule. I think those middle 3 games with Joe Flacco, I have him as a top 30 wide receiver, I believe, with Joe Flacco under center. How are you guys approaching Michael Pittman this week?
Close. It's in the vicinity here. I will say this, though, is that, like, I know last week was bad, 1 catch. Those 3 games with Flacco were better. They weren't exactly dominant. 13 catches in those 3 games. Not a huge number, so under 5 per game. He scored a touchdown in 2 of those, which I think kind of clouds the reality. In the 4 games with Joe Flacco, he has 1 game with more than 37 receiving yards. So maybe close to like wide receiver 4 value, but I don't think this is locked territory. It's definitely, you might well have better options.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one. I mean, Bill's pretty good pass defense as well. He is still playing 83% of the snaps over the last few weeks with Flacco, so there's reason to believe he can have a big game. We know he's a very talented player. But yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I mean, he was wide receiver 19 those 3 weeks with Flacco. I mean, I know that he had a big yardage game with no touchdown, and he had the 2 touchdowns with low yardage. There's reason for optimism here, but obviously it's tough right now with the last couple of weeks. So I think he's a fringe wide receiver 3.
Joe Flacco is elite, which is always great.
Yeah, that helps.
And so that helps when you have an elite quarterback under center.
This is a tough one, though. Such a good player.
You are such a hater, man.
Yeah.
What? I had the more positive case on that one.
No, I'm talking about Flacco, not Pittman.
Oh, on Flacco?
Yeah.
What?
'Cause he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah, I didn't say anything.
Has Jalen Hurts ever done that?
No, he
Joe
hasn't.
Burrow?
Nope.
Lamar Jackson?
Nope.
Put some respect on his name.
I
man.
didn't say anything. I say his. I
Mike's like, why am I catching strays here? What's going
I
on?
say his name.
Man is under siege right now.
I say his name correctly. Like I'm the only one that does that. Like,
The only one that gives him the due respect.
Oh, man.
It's so good. Hey, we mentioned earlier when I was talking about Jonnu Smith how frustrated I was with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle taking on the LA Rams this week. It hasn't been great, Field Yates. Last 2 weeks with Tua under center, we were hoping things were going to be different. Do you believe and have hope that here in Week 10 we see the Tyreek Hill that we thought we were going to see with Tua back?
I'm going to spare numbers and instead go to a thing that Mike brought up yesterday. With Christian McCaffrey, it's not do you have him ranked as RB6 or RB1. It's yes or no to starting him, right?
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Yes to Tyreek Hill, no to Jaylen Waddle for me, right?
That's a good way
That's
to
where I
put it.
land. That's
like that.
I don't want to, the numbers are what they are. As you guys all know, Jaylen Waddle has been an abject disaster, probably clouded only because we've been talking more about Tyreek Hill, but still Tyreek Hill is good enough in a good matchup that I'm still going to hold value there. So yes to Tyreek, no to Jaylen Waddle.
I think that's fair. I'll give you just a couple numbers. Single-digit fantasy points in 7 straight games for Jaylen Waddle, with or without Tua. So it has been rough. So that supports your cause for sure. Tyreek, I will say this. He's been a letdown the last couple of weeks. He still has 70 or more yards in both of those games. So it's not like he's been awful. He's been startable, just doesn't have the ceiling we're used to that we saw
league winner.
last
Week
year.
winner, sorry.
His air yard share this year almost identical to last year. The targets are down, but the air yards are still there. So it's a chance for some big plays. And they're playing the Rams, which has been a pretty good matchup. And they allowed a cool 37 points to JSN last week. So maybe there's something there. Maybe Tyreek could follow and put up a big game this week.
Monday Night Football Tyreek.
I swear, if Jonnu Smith has more fantasy points than these 2 wide receivers, I'm going to lose my
They're
mind.
just going to come out
Shave your head.
first 10 plays, 6 are for Jonnu.
Stop. I will lose it. I will
Scheme
lose
it up,
it.
maybe scheme it up.
Oh, wait, it's Monday night, right? So they're taking a deep shot on the first play to
Oh,
yeah.
action to Achan, deep to Tyreek.
All right, let's talk about Jameson Williams. We mentioned him a little bit, too, when we were talking about Sam LaPorta. Back from his suspension, guys, here. Is he a start this week, or is he outside of your top 40?
He is outside my top 40 by a decent margin. He's wide receiver 54 for me, all the way down the board at 54. Jameson Williams came out with his hair on fire in the first 2 games.
Screaming.
20 targets. His last 4 games, 10 targets.
Yeah, it's rough.
So we talked about how even Amon-Ra and LaPorta are seeing like a depressed target share. It apparently applies to JMO. Of course, Jameson Williams is more prone than probably any other player that I have ranked from like 50 to 55 to catch one pass and turn it into 65 yards and a touchdown. But I would be opting against Jameson Williams.
Yeah, this is like LaPorta or Andrews of receivers, where you're like, he's only getting a couple targets, but decent chance to have a big player score a touchdown.
Yep.
And by the way, the Houston pass defense, very bizarre. Like, they are playing on an efficiency level, playing elite ball, the second lowest catch rate to receivers, the 9th lowest yards per target. Their EPA against the pass is outstanding. But they've led the most touchdowns to wide receivers this season and the 7th most fantasy points. Sometimes they just don't check out. It's just a high variance game. It's small samples, and sometimes this happens with teams. So it's kind of I'm curious to see which way it goes, if they're going to keep allowing fantasy points, or if that efficient play, the raw talent they have in the secondary, if it's going to lead to them slowing receivers. But nonetheless, not a matchup where I feel comfortable starting Jameson.
It's really frustrating watching that target share after those first 2 games just plummet with everyone else in this offense. But
you can't blame them, though, right?
Jared Goff is just playing his butt off.
Yeah.
Honestly, like what he has been able to do from an actual NFL perspective, not fantasy perspective, has just been
fantasy weeks, too.
borderline historical with what he's done. I saw that he's completed 30 straight passes to Amon-Ra St. Brown without an incompletion.
Is that right? Wow.
30
I
straight
believe it's
passes.
now one short of the record held by, as many people know, one of the great receivers in the NFL, Khalil Shakir.
Oh, is that right?
He said it like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, no way.
He broke Michael Thomas's record, and now Amon-Ra has a chance to break that record.
Unbelievable.
wild. Wow.
Unbelievable.
I
The
did not
Lions
know
still
that.
having more touchdowns over the last 5 weeks than incompletions. Part of that is because they're not throwing the ball 40 times a game, 45 times a game. They don't need to as a part of that. And I think because they're not playing from behind, Jameson Williams, as good as anyone in the NFL to take one play 70 yards for a touchdown, but it also means he might not get the kind of target share we're looking for.
And we talked about this, I think, on FF Now. Like, their defense is playing way better than you realize. They've kind of actually slowed against the run lately, but efficiency-wise against the pass, they've been outstanding this year. They're just everyone's throwing nonstop on them because they're always ahead, and they total up. They add up fantasy points, but they're playing well. They're playing well and quietly on both sides of the ball.
100%. All right, let's talk about the Bills wide receivers here really quickly.
Let's be quick because I want to get to our big game of the night.
Keon Coleman did not practice yesterday. Amari Cooper was limited at practice yesterday. Obviously, Khalil Shakir feels like we're going to be good to go there. But, Field, when you look at these two wide receivers, do you have any leanings or expectations with either Coleman or Cooper?
My expectation is Keon Coleman will not play this week. That's my expectation.
He's another
Maybe
guy
even
pulled out.
longer. If you told me by the end of the day that he's on IR, I wouldn't be surprised. The Bills have been so I would say ambiguous about what's going on right now. So I would say that Keon Coleman is a long shot to play in Week 10, which should mean good things for Amari Cooper himself. Still dealing with that wrist injury, but just take one body away, and it should be Amari Cooper and obviously Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid all in good spots this week.
Yeah, great. Both wide receiver 3 options, probably either way, whether or not Coleman plays. Shakir doesn't score touchdowns, but 10-plus fantasy points in 7 of 8 games, just a really good floor.
I'm pretty sure that means that Mac Hollins is going to get in the end zone twice. Is that
Probably.
You know what? I don't care. If he does, I don't care. Some people, the random touchdown score that bothers you. If it's Mac, I don't care.
I agree with you.
I
If it's
love
Mac
Mac
Hollins, I'm all right with it.
Dude, he's been teaching me science experiments for the month
He's so
of
great.
November.
I hope he's gotten the focus bump in his Instagram
I hope so.
profile because
Yeah.
we do pump it a lot. I love his Instagram.
So they're not the early game on Sunday. So let's say Cooper's out, and let's say Coleman's out. A little long shot.
Mac Hollins,
long
long
shot
shot.
there for
Mac
you.
Hollins, long shot.
You know what, though? The last time I did, I went for the long shot based off vibes only.
Jake Bobo.
I let Cedric Tillman. I had Cedric Tillman, and then I was like, I'll just do Bobo.
No.
I would have been on that would have been back-to-back-to-back 22-plus point weeks on long shot. I would have overtaken Shefty for the points lead for the season, and instead, I'm going to have to crush it again this week because Mike Gesicki crushed it.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yes, he did crush it last week. And speaking of Mike Gesicki, let's get
go.
into our Thursday Night Football preview. Bengals at Ravens. Fields, you already mentioned it. This feels like it should be a really fun Thursday night showdown. One thing to mention, we are very likely not going to have T. Higgins in this one. Seems like we're going to be in another spot where it could be a potential Mike Gesicki week, Fields Yates. Are you going back to the well if you did use Mike Gesicki last week? Do you think you have him as a top 10 tight end?
Tell you what, with the 4 teams on a bye this week, right? You've got no Brock Bowers amongst other Nova David and Njoku, right? We've got some solid tight end options that are unavailable this week. I am going back to the well here for Mike Gesicki.
No doubt,
He was one of my most added players on waivers over the past few weeks, and just look at the splits without T. Higgins on the field. I've talked about this several times now, but they've played 4 games without T. Higgins this season. The leading receiver in 3 of those. Mike Gesicki. Joe Burrow has been talking about this guy a ton recently. He loves Mike Gesicki. And I'm not here to tell you that Mike Gesicki has always been this game-altering player, but he has had a ton of useful moments in his NFL career.
No doubt,
It's pretty easy to understand why he's been good when T. Higgins is out. He's 6'5". He has an 8-foot wingspan. The guy is massive. He's a former volleyball player. He's a legit receiving option. He is functioning as wide receiver 2 for Cincinnati when T. Higgins is out. So am I counting on 25 fantasy points again tonight?
Absolutely.
No, but for a tight end to be usable, if you get me 5 catches and 50-ish yards, I'm saying to myself, job well done.
Yeah, those 4 games, he's averaging 15.1 fantasy points per game. The only tight end averaging more than that this season is George Kittle. So
crazy.
He's tight end 2 during those weeks. Also, Eric All, the rookie, was starting to steal some work from him. He's on IR. He's done for the season. It's just, even if Higgins were back, there's more snaps, more routes to be had, more targets to be had for Mike Gesicki. So he's in a good spot here. The Ravens, by the way, 3rd most yards, 11th most fantasy points, 4 15-plus fantasy games to that position this year. No doubt. He's tight end 7 for me. He's locked in there as a starter this week.
Yeah. He's definitely someone that you can look at, especially like we mentioned.
Yeah.
It's Brock Bowers, it's David Njoku, it's Tucker Kraft. All three of them are on bye this week. And then if you've got the other guys that you're not totally sure on, maybe you drafted a Mark Andrews, maybe you drafted a Sam LaPorta. I think we have Mike Gesicki ahead of all of them, knowing that there's not going to be T. Higgins here. On the other side, it does look like we're not going to have Isaiah Likely in this game.
He's already been ruled out. Yep.
Does that mean that you get a little bit of an uptick in Mark Andrews, or are you still a Mark
Not
Andrews
now,
hater?
then when? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Likely's been out snapping in basically every game this season, so he should get a little bit more run in this game.
Two things. I wanted to clean this up just really, really quickly. Is obviously there's going to be no Zach Moss for this game and probably the rest of the regular season.
Yep.
Remember back in week 1 when we talked about like stuff that you're watching as opposed to stuff that's like actionable? Like I am watching tonight how much Khalil Herbert plays, because if this guy suits up and plays like 35 to 40% of the snaps, giddy up, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if he comes out and he plays like 5 snaps tonight, that also wouldn't surprise me too. But just for those that are mining the waiver wire for a potentially low-end flex play at running back spot, or you're playing a super deep league like we do, Khalil Herbert is an interesting player to monitor tonight. Yeah. That was part 1, and I forget if there's anything else.
I think, well, you think about that. I think Chase Brown will probably be featured again like he was last week.
Yeah.
Because then he gets 10 days off, and then I think Khalil Herbert learns the playbook and has a bigger role next week. But I'm with you. I think Herbert should be active, get a little bit of work.
Maybe rather than 32 touches for Chase Brown, he sees like 25 touches, and Khalil Herbert steals a handful of short yardage carries, things like that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, for the best case scenario, if you added Herbert this week, is if he plays 40% of the snaps and gets 12 opportunities, you're like, okay, all right, like we're in business now, right?
Especially in game 1.
We are in Zach Moss business going forward.
Yeah.
Speaking of game 1, last week was the first week that we saw this Ravens offense playing with Diontae Johnson. Zay Flowers absolutely crushed it again. It helped to be able to quantify and bring back some of the fears that we had about whether or not Diontae Johnson was going to steal volume.
Oh, from Zay, okay.
Yeah, from Zay Flowers. I do want to know, with Diontae Johnson here, we mentioned this a little earlier this week. It felt more like a luxury ad for this offense. Do you have Diontae Johnson in the same spot that he was with the Carolina Panthers, where he was either a low-end wide receiver 2 or a high-end flex play, or has that changed now that he's on this Ravens team?
Not yet for me, for a couple of reasons. One is, I said, the ceiling went down from Carolina to Baltimore. We hope that the floor goes up relative to what a Bryce Young offense was in Carolina for Diontae Johnson. Remember, DeAndre Hopkins went from a third of the snaps to basically every snap for Kansas City? That happened when he went from a Sunday game to a Monday night game. Diontae Johnson really still hasn't practiced with Lamar Jackson because Lamar has been load managed of late. Yep. So my thought process with Diontae last night is actually fairly straightforward, is that if you're starting Diontae Johnson, it's not because I expect him to play every snap and expect him to see 10 targets. This could be a really high-scoring game. You kind of want a lot of nibbles and pieces of this game tonight. So I almost feel like if you're playing Diontae Johnson, which is probably in a deeper league, it's maybe he catches 3 passes for 43 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, I agree. He only played 30% of the snaps last week, 0 targets in that game. But also with Isaiah Likely out, that should mean more 11 personnel. And again, when you had Diontae Johnson, you expect to have more 3 wide sets on the field. So I do think he'll play substantially more tonight. And this is a big game. The Bengals beat them a few weeks ago. They have to play better. And
the Bengals did not beat them.
Oh, did they? What? The Ravens?
The Ravens won that game, dude.
Oh, did they? The Ravens won that one?
Yeah, but dude, that's our producer Tyler's a huge Bengals fan.
With the
Bengals
back
41-38 Baltimore.
That's right.
We're up
that was
big.
that high.
That's rude. Tyler,
I think I had that backwards.
If you want him off the show in future days, let me know.
The Bengals
He's gone.
Bengals had a huge offensive day. They had Higgins
5 touchdowns by Burrow.
That's right. I'm getting older. See,
Most weeks that the Bengals score 5 offensive touchdowns, they do get a dub.
It was look. I'm a fantasy guy. It was a fantasy win.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. That's
Fantasy
it.
win for
That's
the
it.
Bengals offense. But the Bengals need this one. This is a tough one to pick because the Bengals have to pull off this upset.
This changes the season. This changes the season entirely.
They
They win tonight 5-5. A game back of Baltimore, by the way. They would be just 1 game back of Baltimore if they win tonight. And all of a sudden,
That'd be huge.
risky Bengals, who seem to just play with their food in the first 3 weeks of the season every year, will be right back in the AFC playoff picture. And they are the proverbial nobody wants to play them team in the playoffs.
Yeah. I got to be honest. It feels like this team is coming along. This is kind of what you want. You don't want to have your team struggle off the start, but it feels like they are really hitting their stride right now as you want to be able to see it. If you want to have a little extra fun while watching this football game, we got a fantasy-focused parlay for you. Derrick Henry and Chase Brown and Lamar Jackson each to record 20-plus rushing yards in each half. All right, I'm going to say that one more time. We're looking for 20 or more rushing yards in both the first and second half for Derrick Henry, Chase Brown, and Lamar Jackson. It was plus 450. It is now plus 600. Head on over to ESPN Bet if you want to play that with us. By the way, what do you think the anytime touchdown line is at for Derrick Henry?
Oh, minus 225.
Minus 350.
Oh my
Wow, what?
Minus 350 to get a touchdown for
That's
Derrick Henry.
wild.
That is insane. Just to be clear, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, all lineup blocks.
Lineup blocks.
Okay. And then others on the periphery. Gesicki sort of entering that category as well. Who are you guys picking in this game?
Man, it's so tough. I mean, the numbers say Baltimore. I'm sure they're like what, a 3-point favorite, something like that. But
I think they're 5.5-point favorites.
Is it really 5.5? Man, I didn't check that. But I think I have to pick. Like it's one of the weird things. It's like the brain says Ravens are going to win because they're the better team, and odds are they're going to win. But I think the Bengals don't get swept by them. I think they just have to.
ESPN Bet right now, Ravens are minus 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
Number. All right. So you're picking the Bengals?
No, I'm picking the Ravens.
Okay,
but
Daniel, who you taking?
I lived in Baltimore for a long time. My cat Jobin is a huge Ravens fan because, when I adopted him, the Lions were real bad, and he didn't want to be a Lions fan, so he decided to be a Ravens fan. Okay. So I'm going to go for my cat.
How did he decide that?
Because he didn't want to be a Lions.
He didn't want to be a Lions
But
fan.
how did your cat decide?
He never liked it when I put him in Lions gear. When I tried to dress him up, my cat was just never into
You
it.
put all the logos on the floor, and the one he peed on.
No, I wish that dude. People that do stuff like that with their dogs. I believe there's a corgi that is awesome at that by being able to hit a ball in down the stairs and helps
really?
choose to. Yeah, it's real. There's a lot of real cute ones. But no, because of my cat Jobin, who I adopted in Baltimore off the mean streets of Baltimore, I'm gonna go with the Ravens here in this one.
Okay, nice pick by both of you, but you're wrong. Bengals.
All right.
Okay, so this is why you're Tyler's favorite. Our producer loves you so much right now.
Who day?
Look, the
Who
Bengals
day?
are
Who day?
a fun team, and I want them to make the playoffs. So I hope they win.
Yeah.
I hope they
Who day? Who day? Who day? Who day? Who day? Who do you think won't beat them Bengals? Not the Ravens tonight.
Not the field.
I bet against them too much this. I have not literally bet. Sorry to be clear, but too many I'm still feeling the Lamar versus Anthony Richardson here. I probably shouldn't doubt them. I probably should pick the Ravens, but
If the Ravens are
good
up,
for the show.
If the Ravens are up 31-10, we need to post that clip on social.
Yes.
You'll just get destroyed.
You never know that this game might not be. I'm just saying. It's good for the show if we have some diversity in our picks.
I agree with that.
It also prevents us from looking like idiots if we all pick the Ravens, the Bengals win.
I agree.
I think you should just pick what you think's going to happen.
You think
That's
so?
no fun. That's way too logical, Mike.
That's why he gets so mad at me on Red Zone because I don't pick just one.
Oh, I hate you on Red Zone. For what it's worth, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you as a person. But in Red Zone, you are the opposite of fun.
Will Kyle Juszczyk set the
asked me a
single
question.
game rushing record? I'm gonna go with no. What? Mike, come on.
This is what happens. He gets so steamed. But I'm beating you by 20 this year because
Well,
you're
you know
just
what?
I'm just going to pick
something,
the
Mike,
opposite.
I wanted you to finally get a win.
I don't know. That's just the way my brain works. I'm just trying to. I don't care. We're here to win.
That's just
All
the
right.
way my brain works.
You're you're
exactly.
the Bill Belichick here. I thought
F1.
winning was
Yes,
fun.
exactly.
Control
I'm
F1.
Cincinnati.
Enter the formula. Sum of
He thinks
columns
he's
A
offending
and
me.
B.
I'm not offended. I
slash
like to win.
row 8 divisible by 0.
I feel better about winning than.
Mike Evans will not score a touchdown this week.
Yeah, he
Should have
won't.
been
'cause
Mike.
he's on
Should
IR.
have been Mike Clay for Halloween. I got to be honest.
I am going to do that next year.
Okay, done.
Write that down. So I don't know who I'm talking to, but write that down.
Somebody write it down.
I'll be
Van
Field.
Wilder,
I'll be
he just
Field.
walked around. Write that down.
I'll be Field. You be me. We'll see.
Oh,
That could be
so
great.
fun. That'd
He
be
could
so
be
fun.
himself.
Yeah. Well, we'll find something fun.
You'd be a parody of yourself.
Show up in a suit and tie.
I was just going to say, I was going to try to figure out what it is that I would do for that. All right, thanks for hanging out with us today. Always fun here on a Thursday. Today's show is presented by Boost Mobile. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. Get your pigskin pick'em picks in.
Get your
Don't forget
pigskin
that.
pick'ems picks in.
And have fun watching Thursday Night Football. We'll see you guys tomorrow on
Good
Friday.
teams. We'll just pick all the opposite. All the